some breaking news coming in on the Prime Minister's US visit, and on the second day of the state visit, a lot of exciting news about the mega deals that are being signed between India and the US in defense, technology as well as space. But first up, let's get you the news on the deal that's being signed on space. And this is according to what we're hearing, that the White House has said that NASA to sign Artemis Accords and send a joint mission to the International Space Station. So India to sign this deal, and NASA and ISRO to sign this deal and send a joint mission to the International Space Station. For more on this, let's go across to Vishnu to get more details. And Vishnu, it's going to happen very soon. By next year, a joint space mission could take place.
Well, Gargi, this is absolutely landmark. It's one among so many landmark deals that we are seeing between India and the United States. Essentially, if it does happen, and it is according to sources that we are now willing to report, that India and the United States are going to announce a very major space deal which will involve Indians traveling to the International Space Station. It will also likely include India signing on to the Artemis agreement. What exactly is the Artemis mission? Well, it is something which NASA is looking at very closely. It aims to get a person of color onto the moon, onto the surface of the moon, and to ensure that there is a permanent habitation of the moon and that this habitation is done robustly. Now, that can happen only through international cooperation, which is what Artemis aims to promote. But more than anything else, what Artemis is also looking to do is to establish international guidelines, the rules, the laws for exploration of outer space and the peaceful use of outer space. Now, this is important because, remember, Russia and China have their own independent space programs, very, very robust space programs. If anything, Russia has been the leader in space exploration technology, space technology in so many different areas. But what Artemis seeks to do, and India is signing on Artemis most likely, is that, you are aligning yourself more in a sense with the international protocol identified by NASA and the United States. And this is very, very important indeed. It comes at a time when China has invested very, very heavily in their own space missions, their own space program. They've got their space station over there. They've landed a rover on the planet, on the surface of the moon. I should say they've got their own launchers, etc., etc. India's ISRO is absolutely outstanding, and there's real potential over there. But in order to make that big jump from being a rocket manufacturer or a satellite manufacturer to being one among the major space powers, getting an Indian astronaut into the space station or be involved in a mission to the moon or elsewhere in the future, you do need to tie up with NASA. So this is an important first step. There are various agreements with NASA already, but this is the major one. And I think to actually see an Indian in the International Space Station would be very, very welcome news indeed. Well, we've got one of the finest scientists in NASA joining us now on the phone line, Dr. Amitabh Ghosh. He's been very, very closely involved with NASA missions to Mars. Wonderful to have you, Dr. Ghosh. Your first thoughts on what we are now reporting, that there likely be an Indian in the International Space Station and that India will likely sign on to the Artemis Accord.
So both are very important developments. You have to understand the Artemis Accord is kind of the legal framework to operate in space. And so this replaces a previous generation, much antiquated legal structure. So, if you want to participate in space, you kind of have to have some rules of engagement, from containment to respect of each other's landing sites. It's very common sense, neutral set of rules. But, it's a very important step before you can go into further collaboration. There is legal risk, there is liability. So all this is very welcome. There are a lot of nations which have signed and a lot of nations that are thinking of signing. But I don't think it's a political thing. It's just it's a set of rules.
Right.
And about the International Space Station, the International Space Station is a framework before we go off to another heavenly body like the moon or Mars. So it's very important to learn to live in space. And so NASA has one, and there is talk of private space stations. China has their space station. So it's just 250 miles above Earth, but it's a very important place to experiment before you go further. So Elon Musk's company will start space tourism flights. They've already have started. So it's a very important development for India to be involved in this next frontier.
All right, Dr. Ghosh, wonderful to speak to you, and hopefully we'll be speaking to you later on today as well on the significance of this. We are reporting this at this stage on the basis of sources. We expect a final agreement to be announced in terms of a joint statement or something more specific. India and the United States getting into more profound sharing and a more profound agreement in the sphere of space than we've seen ever before. We likely have an Indian astronaut on the Indian International Space Station, and perhaps an Indian eventually on the surface of the moon. But prior to that, there are the Artemis Accords, which actually sets down a series of guidelines for the peaceful use of space and certainly maintaining a robust presence in the near future on the surface of the moon.